All right, we are now live. We are going to wait for some more participants to join, and as soon as there's 4 seconds in between the popcorn of people joining, we will go ahead and kick it off. I see folks are joining. Okay, we've got some familiar names there. We'll just wait for some more folks to join, and then we will get started. Welcome, everyone. Come on in. Step right in. All right, more people joining. Here we go. Here we go. We've got the chat room. We've got the Q&A panel, Q&A panel in the Whova. So feel free to interact there. Feel free to also interact in the app, the mobile app as well. Okay, we got about over 20 people now here. More folks are joining. All right. Okay, cool. I see some familiar names there. Very cool. More folks are joining. We'll just get started in just a second. Okay, I'm trying to visualize in my head people just entering the room over, it's cool. So we've got, we're ready to go here. We're ready to almost get started here. Okay. All right. I think, let me count it off. Okay. Yes. Okay. All right. So welcome everyone to one of the breakout sessions here for our 11:15 to 12 o'clock hour. I'm Matthias Nino. I'm kind of hosting this session along with Lakshmi Muthiala. Today, this session, we are extremely excited to welcome one of the pillars of our community who has been a voice for how to collaborate better, and also a great guide, certified Scrum trainer in Scrum. And anyone who is very much geeking on Scrum, wants to understand Scrum, this is the person you go to if you want to interact with and get guidance from in our community, the people that are close on Scrum. So today, with reflection on the last 20 years, obviously Scrum is one of the central collaboration games that is the vehicle for agility for many of us. We have Jim York here, who will be talking about the Scrum Guide, updates to the Scrum Guide, and he'll give his reflection. Feel free to interact in the chat and in the Q&A, ask your questions, and we want to make this as interactive as possible. And that's all I'll say. I will now hand it off to Jim.
All right, thank you so much for the intro. See some familiar faces out there. Just quick shout out to Paul and George and Jason, and I'm sure there's some other folks out there that I'm just not seeing all the names, but welcome. 45 minutes is not a lot of time to go over the history of what has happened in the Agile movement in the Washington, D.C. area over the last 20 years. And frankly, it's been longer than 20 years because we've been doing stuff in the Washington, D.C. area in the space that we now call Agile for a long time. It's in many ways, it's nothing new. I kind of think about as we're kind of revisiting things that have gone before, and we're standing on the shoulders of giants. And we learn from each other. So I'm a coach. I tend to focus on the goals of the people that I work with and help them attain those goals. So the latest version of the Scrum Guide came out just this last fall, and reading through it, it kind of inspired me to start a few conversations with folks and how we might use this to get better at what we do. So I'm gonna share my screen here, and if you would bear with me, I don't know if my face will go away. If it does, that's cool, because the important part here is actually to see my screen. There we go. We should have an increment is born. An increment is born. If you read through the 2020 version of the Scrum Guide, you'll recognize this statement, and this kind of inspired me for this talk. So just to give you a quick overview here, I'm going to do a little navigation.
First of all, how excited are you about this update, Jim?
How excited. You know, every time there's an update to the Scrum Guide, it's like somebody's messing with a religious document. People look at these words and it's like, wow, and I think it's a little bit like trying to capture lightning in a bottle. We are inadequate to express these concepts, and we do the best we can. And I think occasionally we hit it and we get some new insights. And other times we might take a step or two backwards. And the great thing about this is an evolution. This is evolving, and we learn. We learn as we go. We figure out what works, what doesn't work, what resonates with people. And bottom line is we look at how people actually practice and whether they're achieving the results that they had hoped for. I'm thinking this new version of the Scrum Guide has got a lot of great opportunity and potential for people to kind of change the way they're playing the game.
Hmm.
So let me step through things with you on this. So I'm gonna come to first just a little intro for myself, and you guys gave a great intro already for me. So I'm gonna do this pretty quickly here. So my company is Fox Edge. I co-founded this company with my wife Melissa back in 2007. So this is our 14th year. And the inspiration for our company came from a little parable or poem that was written by a Greek philosopher 2,600 years ago. Archilochus was his name. And Archilochus wrote that the fox knows many things, the hedgehog knows one big thing. And we looked at that and said, the fox knows many things. That sounds like somebody who kind of looks and takes in lots of input and then makes decisions and optimizes based on that. So for us, the fox was agility. And the hedgehog, on the other hand, is this creature that kind of goes about doing its own little thing. And anytime something comes along and distracts it or disrupts it, it rolls up into a tight little ball and basically says, go away. And once whatever that distraction is goes away, it's back doing its thing. So for us, that was the kind of pinnacle of focus. So it's that whole idea of balancing agility and focus. So we find that organizations that are able to do that well tend to succeed better than their competitors in the marketplace. So I'm going to bring up another little slide here, just the kind of about me thing. So I wanted to give you a little background. So I've always had a strong pull towards meeting the needs of customers, and by extension, toward the needs of people who create the solutions that meet those customers' needs. So I began my professional career in the mid-1980s, and through the mid-1990s, I was in the trenches building solutions for customers. And during that period of time, to meet increasing demand, I started building teams because, to tell you the truth, when I started, I was a team of one. I basically did soup to nuts everything that you needed to do to collect information about what a customer's need is, interact with them, and do the design, the architecture, the engineering, the coding, the building of the application, the deployment, the training, maintenance, support, operations. Literally, I had to do it all, and frankly, I wasn't enough. So I had to start bringing other people in to help me. So I started building a team, and then I started to build teams because the demand continued to expand. In the mid-1990s to the early 2000s, I experienced a shift. I had a client come to me one time and said, we really love when your teams build products for us because they're really responsive and they're fast and we get a good fit for our needs. We're struggling with our own internal teams. Could you come and work with those teams and see if you can get them to be more like your teams? So I began a shift in that mid-1990s time period to helping others build teams. So that was kind of my journey towards becoming a coach. In 1999, I was introduced to Scrum and Extreme Programming, began using that. In 2000 was my first and so far only attempt to be both Scrum Master and Product Owner for a team simultaneously. That's another story for another day. More than happy to talk to you about what happened with that. But I have decided that that's generally not a good idea. 2004, I co-taught my first certified Scrum Master class with Ken Schwaber. Over the next year, I taught a number of co-taught a number of classes with him and some other of the early Scrum trainers. In 2005, I officially became a certified Scrum trainer myself. And in 2008, 2009 time period, I added the Certified Scrum Coach credential, which later became the Certified Agile Coach program at the Scrum Alliance, and then bifurcated into the Certified Enterprise Coach and the Certified Team Coach programs. So currently I'm a certified Scrum trainer, and I hold both the Certified Enterprise Coach and the Certified Team Coach guide level certs from the Scrum Alliance. So anyway, enough about me. Let me close that back out and come back to our general presentation here. So one of the things I love about the fact that we're doing this across a webinar is that means that you have an internet connection right now. And if you have not done so already, I'm going to encourage you at this point to pause and download a copy of the current Scrum Guide. So this is available out on scrumguides.org. The URL for that is shown on your screen right now. So go ahead out and grab a copy of that. We're going to be going through this and annotating some key areas in the guide, and might be helpful to have a copy. Now, don't worry, I'm going to, this.
I just posted it in the chat.
Yeah, and the session's being recorded, so you'll be able to come back and take a look at what I've highlighted in this as well. So first, let's talk about a little history on the Scrum Guide itself. So in 1993, we had the first recognized Scrum team. This was Jeff Sutherland's team at Easel Corporation. Shortly thereafter, Ken Schwaber also began working with Scrum, and by 1995, we had the first presentation on Scrum at the OOPSLA conference that year. So at that point in time, Scrum was released into the wild, and anybody could use it. This is a beautiful thing. It was basically, not proprietary. It was released. Here's something we've been doing, and it's open to anybody to try it. So 2001, we had the first Scrum book. This was the Agile Software Development with Scrum book. And this was written by Ken Schwaber. So this is the first time that, the first time we had a book form. Now, these early publications about Scrum, the rules were kind of hard to find. They were kind of embedded in the writing, so there was not a rule book per se. The first rules appeared as an appendix in Ken Schwaber's next book, Agile Project Management with Scrum. So Appendix A was the rules. Now, the first Scrum Guide appeared in 2010. So the document we're going through today has its beginnings in these presentations, in the books, and then we had the very first Scrum Guide. In the period of time, 2009, there was kind of an informal draft version of it, and we had the official released version in 2010. Since that time, there have been updates. We had one in 2011, one in 2013. We had a longer period of time before there was an update from 13 to 2016. Then we had another update in 2017. And once again, another period of time, 3 years before we had the most recent update in 2020. So the bottom line is that Scrum has evolved and its description has been refined through this time, and very likely it will continue to do so. So we try to capture lightning in a bottle, but we are always falling short, in my opinion. So great words, great efforts, but this is something that's just incredibly difficult to capture in words. Cynical Jim is that every great idea ultimately gets corrupted. And despite our best efforts to capture this, in practice, we sometimes deviate from what was originally intended. So we continue to try. Thank goodness we're agile, because we try, we learn from that experience, and we try again.
Yeah,
so,
Alistair actually said that in his keynote. He says, how do you know something has been incredibly successful is when people try to corrupt and co-opt it.
There you go. There you go. No, I appreciate that. Now, I'm a bit at a disadvantage here because my view of myself has disappeared. Oh, no, there it is. Oh, it's cool. I can see my little timer back there. So I'm watching our time here. We're about a third of the way through. So I want to get into the meat of this. What is new with the update? Now here we're going to get a little fancier. I'm going to change my display. We're going to go sideways now. So a little bit of change here. So the first thing with what's new is everything old is new again. The spirit of Scrum is the same throughout these guides, all the way from 2010 up to 2020. The spirit's the same. One of the key differences in the 2020 version is that the words are more precise, concise, and in my opinion, more clear. Now, time will tell whether that's true or not. But one thing we do know is that the guide is shorter. That's very clear. That's a quantitative measurement. It's 2 pages shorter than previous versions. In my opinion, it's less prescriptive, but it's still just as hard as it always was to implement and do. So everything old is new again. We're going to see some language here that might appear new, but it's grounded very deeply in the roots. All right, so now let's see if I can get a copy of the Scrum Guide to appear here. Let me see. It's taking me a moment here. There we go. No, there we go. All right, so now if the application here will let me do it, we're going to go through some changes to the team. All right, so the first thing, we're going to go to page 5 in the guide. There we go. And I got a little vestige there from an earlier session. So let me just get that back out of the way. There we go. So we're on page 5 and we're looking at the Scrum team. So we're gonna start down a little bit lower on the screen. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is a shift in language. So let me get a little marker here. So the first thing is that we are having the word roles removed from the guide. You might recall through the years, we talked about the 3 roles in Scrum. The word role doesn't appear at all in this current version of the Scrum Guide. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't use the word role anymore. You can obviously talk about the 3 roles and having a product owner and a Scrum Master and developers. You can still talk about it that way. The guide, however, has shifted the language to focus on 3 specific accountabilities within the Scrum team. And you might wonder what's going on there. Why is it not role anymore, and why is it accountabilities? Aren't they kind of the same thing? Well, they are and they aren't. We want to make sure that we understand the distinction between what each of these team members are doing on the team. We had an interesting implementation of Scrum, fairly common, where we would have almost an us versus them. And that dynamic of the product owner negotiating with the developers, sometimes that turned into kind of a dysfunctional type of relationship. So one of the focuses in the Scrum Guide in the 2020 version is that we're all on the same team. Now, again, this is not new. This is not a new concept. This has always been there, but we haven't necessarily executed or implemented well in the spirit of what's there. So now we're talking about specific accountabilities within the Scrum team. So we have the Scrum team with developers, product owner, and Scrum Master, 3 distinct accountabilities. Now, if we look up higher on the page, we are going to have the distinction of these roles and kind of how many people we have for this. So again, the fundamental unit of Scrum is a small team of people. The Scrum team consists of, okay, now here we go, 1 Scrum Master. So your team is going to have a Scrum Master, 1 product owner, and developers. That's something that's new. We had developers before, but do you recall it was the development team? So there's no longer a development team. And this is something that is really specific here. If you'll note, following that is like within a Scrum team, there are no sub-teams. or hierarchies. Again, this is not new. This language was here before. However, in implementation, interpretation of this, the fact that we used to call it a development team created a strange dynamic in many implementations, where you had this us versus them, with the development team sitting on one side, the product owner sitting on another side, and somehow the scrum master being kind of like a referee that's trying to ensure a fair play. So now it's being very specific, very clear. We all sink or swim together. We're all on the same team. There's no us versus them. There's no sub teams. So we've eliminated entirely the word or the phrase development team. Now you're just developers. So this is again, nothing new. It's just a distinction, perhaps better clarity in the language. So let's look at what the Scrum team is responsible for. So this is also not new, but it's a potentially different way of thinking about it. So the Scrum team is responsible for all product-related activities, from stakeholder collaboration, verification, maintenance, operation, experimentation, research and development, and anything else that might be required. Anything else that might be required. This Scrum team is now accountable explicitly for everything related to the product. So if you have sales, marketing, regulatory compliance, security audit, this Scrum team is now responsible for that as well. All product related activities. So this is literally everything along the value stream. It is now the Scrum team's responsibility to accommodate and accomplish all of that within the team. This is potentially a significant shift in the way that we think about a Scrum team and what types of skills and capabilities need to be present in order to have a complete cohesive Scrum team. So now let's look at that team and what they do and how they work together. So now we're going to shift back up a little bit higher. And so we know this language of Scrum teams are cross-functional, right? We've seen that before, cross-functional teams. So what does that extend to? And this is really what I think is the important part here, is that the teams are self-managing. What does that mean? Now, you might recall the word before that we used to see all the time was a self-organizing team. So in my experience as a coach, what I found with many teams is that they're allowed to self-organize, but only within the context of this task that I'm telling you to do. And I'm also going to tell you when to do it. And I'm going to tell you who's going to do it on the team. But oh, you can self-organize within those boundaries. Well, the new Scrum Guide is taking a stand that the team is not just self-organizing, they are also self-managing. Now, what does that mean? They internally decide who does what, when, and how. So that is an explicit declaration that there is no one outside the team who is managing them, who is deciding the who, what, when, and how. It's all happening internally. This is happening inside the team. So again, the concept of the team being responsible for everything, all product related activities, plus all things related to their process, who, what, when, and how. So this is a whole Scrum team. Now, if they've got to do all of that work, the typical Scrum team is small. It's maybe 10 people, maybe 8 people, somewhere in this range, between maybe 4 to 9 or 10 people in general on a Scrum team. That's a lot of work for that small number of people. So it's not unusual in my experience as a coach. In fact, this is almost inevitable. Every time I go and talk to anybody about Scrum, whether it's I'm coaching or I'm teaching a class, they almost immediately want to go to, well, what about scaling? We got to scale, and so it's always been my philosophy. We've got to get it right for a single Scrum team before we even begin to think about expanding it to being multiple Scrum teams.
Right.
So this is a really important part. So first off, let's take a look at the language here. So if we're multiple teams, first off is that they have to be cohesive. So if we're going to have to get more capacity, we might consider reorganizing into multiple cohesive Scrum teams, each focused on the same product. Here's where it gets interesting. If you do this, they should share the same product goal, the same product backlog, and the same product owner. This, again, is not new. This concept has been there all along, but this is not the general implementation, at least in my experience. What I often find when organizations go to scaling is they have what Michael James calls a team output owner instead of a product owner. And that team output owner is focused on what that team builds as a piece of a larger puzzle, but not something that holds together itself as something that would be valuable to a customer, encapsulated within that piece of work. So what this is saying is that we are going to have complete cohesive Scrum teams. They're all going to feed off of the same product backlog. And they're going to all have the same product owner, not multiple product owners, not one product owner per team, but one product owner per product. And that all of these teams are working against the same product goal. Again, this is not new. This is still consistent with the spirit of Scrum. It's always been present. It's just the language didn't necessarily lead us to that conclusion in the past. So this is potentially a significant change in the way of thinking of how we handle these larger initiatives that require multiple teams. One product backlog, one product owner, and all of these teams are focused on the same product goal.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of teams run into that roadblock where they suddenly realize, oh my gosh, we're being split apart in priorities and we need one backlog.
Yeah, one backlog. It is so important to keep the team focused and to make progress that's meaningful from a customer's perspective. Absolutely, absolutely critical. So we are going to have this one product backlog, one product owner if we're multiple team. So this is the people aspect of things. So let's take a look at the product aspect of things. So for the product, this idea of one product goal, we're gonna shift here to, let me see.
So we're running up a little bit on time. We don't have a tech check now before lunch, so we do have a little, we can go over a little bit, but I did want to address some questions.
Oh no, absolutely, absolutely. We're getting close. We're getting close. All right, so product goal. Let's take a look at product goal. So I'm going to go to page, what is this? Page 11 in the Scrum Guide. So get down there. Page 11. All right, here we go. So the first thing is the idea of a product goal. So the product goal is the long-term objective for the Scrum team. Long-term objective. So again, thinking about the scaling, we're going to have a single product owner, single product backlog, and a single product goal. So everybody's going to have the same long-term objective for the Scrum team. And here's where I think it gets interesting. The Scrum team must fulfill or abandon one objective before taking on the next.
Interesting.
This is intense focus. This is intense focus. If you recall, the one of the Scrum values is focus. So this is saying that everyone, even if you have multiple teams, everyone is focused on the same thing, the same long-term objective for the Scrum team. And you must either fulfill that product goal, that long-term objective, or abandon it before you move on to whatever the next thing is. So your product backlog is not going to be an eclectic mix of a whole bunch of different kinds of things. It has to be product backlog items focusing on the same thing. So let's take a look now, page 12. definition of done. Here we're starting to get to the stuff that I really think is going to be impactful here. So for the definition of done, first off, let me just draw your attention to the idea that multiple product increments may be created within a sprint. So that's the first thing. Multiple product increments may be created. Now, the second thing is that work cannot be considered part of an increment unless it meets the definition of done. So let me go back to the increment. In order to provide value, an increment must be usable. So this is usable to an actual customer. So we are creating increments of value as we go through our sprints. We can create multiple increments within the same sprint. This is again, nothing new, but a lot of teams executed under the premise that we just need to create an increment by the end of the sprint. So each discrete product backlog item is going to give us the potential here to create a new increment. So let's look at the definition of done. Definition of done, formal state or description of the state of the increment when it meets the quality measures required for the product. So the definition of done is this is what you need to accomplish in order to make it deployable, to make it available to your customers. And my favorite line in the whole new version of the Scrum Guide, the moment a product backlog item meets the definition of done, an increment is born. This enables us to rethink, what do we mean by a product backlog item? If the moment a product backlog item meets the definition of done, an increment is born, that means that each discrete product backlog item needs to be crafted in such a way that a customer on its completion would recognize it as useful and actually be able to take it and use it. Each and every single product backlog item, because once it meets the definition of done, an increment is born, and an increment is the thing that is usable by a customer. So it goes further. Goes further. If a product backlog item does not meet the definition of done, it cannot be released or even presented at the sprint review.
Whoa.
That's huge. No more discussions at a sprint review about how hard the team worked to get this thing done, but just didn't quite get there. We can talk about that in the sprint retrospective, all the reasons why we couldn't get there, what was in our way, and what we might do next time to improve our chances of getting it done. But there's no partial credit, and there's not even the opportunity to even show something that isn't truly done at a sprint review.
Yeah, I can see how that when you demo partial functionality, it while the intention might be good, it causes a lot of confusion.
Yeah. So I wanted to stop there on, because there's other stuff in here that is also good stuff, that are some better descriptions of how Scrum is now communicated, what it actually is, what the rules of the game are.
We've got 10 minutes left.
Yeah, I can go over some questions, Jim, and we can address it based on the highly voted questions. First one is, what are some examples of what a product goal should look like?
Oh boy. So this is something that is so unique to your specific situation. A product goal is a longer term objective for the team. So it's not typically what you're trying to achieve in a specific sprint, though depending on your situation, your product goal may actually shift fairly often into new things. It just depends on how big the goal is. I have found often in my coaching work with teams, I'm either called in at the beginning to help kick things off, go through a launch, or as Diana Larson and Ainsley Nees have in their book, Lift Off. A lot of times I'm brought in later on because there wasn't a good kickoff or liftoff or launch. I think that's instrumental in the early conversations with stakeholders and teams to understand, what is our product? That's a huge question a lot of organizations have, is what actually is our product? you'll get a lot of different perspectives on what a product is and what the specific product is in your context. But who is the customer? Who's the target customer? Who is it that you're trying to meet the needs of? And how do we sort out what the thing is that our product does to fit into that customer's needs? So using techniques like the job to be done, looking at it from the customer's perspective of what it is that they're trying to accomplish, and how does your product integrate into that and become woven into the fabric of their job to be done. So I think these are incredibly important conversations to have, but your product goal needs to be something that addresses a specific customer need that you seek to discover, that you seek to improve the ability of your customer to do ultimately what is their job to be done. Getting your stakeholders together and get everybody on the same page. Everyone is going to have a different perspective going in. The idea of a liftoff or a launch or a kickoff is to ensure that we come to some agreement on what that goal is. And there will be different perspectives. We want those different perspectives. But once we decide on what it is, we either buy into that as a team and we are part of the team and we move forward on achieving that product goal, or we choose to opt out and we are not going to be part of that initiative. But once the decision's been made, you need to act on it. Right. And activate that empirical loop where you learn and refine that goal as you go. Yeah,
that's a great answer. One other thing that, and also looking at the chats, like, the term developer, is there a specific when it comes to what is a developer? And we were also looking at the chats on how the term developer can be, rephrased into some other things like a contributor, for example. Yeah, so I want to know more on that.
There's been a lot of discussion through the years on the word developer, because originally when this was crafted for Scrum, the concept of a developer was somebody who is contributing to the building, the work of taking that idea and making it into something real and tangible that a customer can use. So the word developer, meant, documentation specialist, tester, designer, engineer, architect, coder. It encompassed all of those different titles and everyone that had a contribution into the actual building of the thing, the transition from idea to something real and tangible. They were given that role of developer in Scrum. So it's meant to be inclusive, and to the extent now the rules in the current Scrum guide say that the product owner can also be a developer. Now that's not new, that's always been there before. The Scrum Master can also be a developer. It depends upon what your behaviors are, what your actions are in the moment. So it's literally anyone who contributes to that process of taking something from a concept, an idea, to the real tangible thing that your customers can use. Anyone involved in that, the security auditor, the salesman, the marketer, the trainer, anybody that's involved in creating and sustaining and maintaining value for that product.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes that's confusing because when people hear the word developer, they immediately think programmer, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I think that's changing over time.
I think it is, and part of that may be because we've been talking about this word developer for many years now in the context of Scrum to mean something than what people may have traditionally thought it to be. And there have been arguments to bring in some other new word like contributor or this, that, or the other thing. And, I think most of these concepts require conversation and a development of an understanding of what it is that we mean by the word, because words by themselves are insufficient.
Yes. So one other question is, which tools do you recommend that help overcome limitations of time box? Example, disruptions when it makes more sense to stop mid-sprint than to proceed as planned.
So what tools? I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Overcome limitations of time box.
Yeah, he's looking for recommendations on help overcome limitations of time box? Like example, disruptions when it makes more sense to stop mid-sprint than to proceed as planned.
Yeah.
This can be more
So
specific.
I remember one of the things that was beaten into my head by Ken Schwaber when I was learning about Scrum from him was the number one rule in Scrum was common sense. And you'll never see that written down anywhere in any of the Scrum guides. But I've used that number one rule of common sense through the years to do things that are not explicitly in the Scrum guide. So you can find some guidance on some of these things, like we discover in the middle of a sprint, the time box, where the general rule is no changes allowed. You can find in the various versions of the Scrum guide that the product owner always owns the right to stop a sprint. So the idea that we're in a time box, it's not this ironclad thing that we can't break. If it makes sense to stop it because something has happened that's made the current work and the current sprint not the right thing to do, the product owner always has the right to do that. The Scrum guide gives us guidance that it's not the developer's decision to do that, or it's not the Scrum Master's decision, or it's not somebody external to the team's decision. The Scrum Guide makes it explicit that that is the product owner's decision to do that. So it's present there. I've never been dogmatic about Scrum. I don't believe it's the one and only true tool to getting stuff done. And that rule of common sense, I think, really is useful in the context of our real work, that things do happen and do disrupt our intentions and what we had planned to do, and we have to act accordingly. That said, I always take a pause, and anytime I'm thinking of violating the rules and using that common sense card, I always ask myself, am I copping out here? Am I avoiding a hard decision? Maybe we just can't get this work done by the end of the sprint, and we're just abandoning it without a fight, without thinking creatively, what could we do that would still result in value to our customers? So always want to hold that card back, that common sense card back a little bit and say, okay, let's pause and really think it through.
Yeah, so simple and yet powerful, isn't it? So we don't have any other questions. But if you have any, please ask. Maybe we have 2 minutes, but we can conclude.
Yeah, I think we're at a good spot. Thank you so much, Jim. What are your parting thoughts here in terms of looking back 20 years, like where we are and where things are going with Scrum?
Yeah, well, I've written a number of blog posts and articles on this through the years, and I think we're really experiencing a series of waves of how we think about, interpret, and execute in Agile in general. And I think that this coming together as a whole and looking at it from a holistic perspective, that we're all in this together, and it literally is everybody on the value stream. And that it is also through time. It's from the initial concept of the idea of something that we might want to do to help that customer with their job to be done, all the way through the time period where that job to be done doesn't exist anymore. So the concept of product, the concept of team, I think we're expanding our minds in terms of what that actually means. And as we have this expansion in our thinking about what the possibilities are, I think there's great opportunity for us to rethink everything about how we are organized, how we staff, how we pull things and tie them together, how we craft our concepts of what a product is, what a product backlog item is, what value to a customer is, who our customer is. All of those things, I think, are subject to new insights and potentially new execution. So I'm looking forward to the next 20 years. I think we are just beginning to tap into the potential of what Agile really can do for us.
We'll continue discovering better ways. Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Jim. Really appreciate it. For all of our attendees here, we are now going into the lunch hour. In 10 minutes, there will be some options for you to engage. We do have some sessions you can check out that will be happening during the lunch hour. There is Bob Payne is leading the history of the Agile in the DMV timeline, so you can get acquainted with that. Melissa Daly is actually hosting a laughing yoga session that you can join. And then William Stryden, Agile coach, is actually leading his own little panel of folks to talk about 20 years later, Agile Manifesto, what does it mean to you? And he's going to be facilitating an actual coaching exercise with these people. So you can feel free to join whichever you like as you're eating your lunch. And we'll see you throughout. So thanks again to Jim for joining us. And thank you, Lakshmi, for the great Q&A. And see you all in another session. Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Oh,
thanks
thank
everybody
you.
for participating. Thanks.